Paul Nines. He is the founder of something called Stout Hearted and the managing director of Real Talk Australia. He joins us now. Kia ora, thanks for your time.
It's awesome to be here.
Firstly, talk to us about Real Talk. What is the organisation about? What's some of the things that you do, Paul?
Yeah, Real Talk is an organisation that exists to transform relationships and restore sexual wholeness, essentially to lead people to Jesus through the topic of relationships, dignity, human person related topics. We really try to affirm each and every person is made in God's image, and that marriage, love, sex are all really beautiful and good things, and try to point people in the right direction of those. And we've existed for about 15 years, and we've done over 7,000 presentations all around Australia and in a lot of places around New Zealand as well.
Very good stuff indeed. I mean, the problem is significant, though. The impact that, I suppose, a broken mirror when it comes to our sexual identity and sexual integrity, that's having a huge impact on our society.
Yeah, totally. We're seeing it at every level, relationship breakdown, marriage breakdown, but one of the biggest ones that's our real heart is young people, and seeing young people often entrapped, enslaved to things like pornography, but also just lacking any safe and sound guidance on what they're created for and how they can live life to the full in these areas.
This is a worrying one, isn't it? Because we've got a generation which is growing up now for whom, almost unrestricted access to the worst types of pornography, that has been, that's normal for them. There's a generation for whom pornography was their first introduction to their sexuality. What are you seeing in terms of the impact that this is having on the young people and their ability to form healthy relationships?
Yeah, totally. I think you've nailed it. This is the epicenter of the struggle, I believe. We've got 20 to 30% of people who have problematic porn use saying they developed their habit before they were teenagers. We've got almost close to 100% exposure before adulthood. We've got young people thinking that this is normal. If you think of the average marriage happening now in the 30s, just over 30, the average porn exposure somewhere in the sort of 11 to 13 age group. We've got 20 years of getting tens of thousands of problematic imagery and messages on who we are, how we relate, and our sexuality and what sex is meant to be. And so the ramifications are game-changing. Like this has changed the world in a way that most people just don't want to know about and don't recognize. Like the number of porn videos viewed every year is just out of control. If I told you the stats, you'd fall over or have to pull over your car to have a little cry.
Yeah. No, it is pretty awful. And I know for some people they say, oh, well, this is just free speech and freedom of expression. And, there may be some people who are even thinking, well, gosh, this doesn't do any harm. This is just, something to distract me on the side. Talk to us about the harm that is done by pornography in particular, not just for the individuals and their families, but on a societal level.
Yeah, I like to liken porn use to be a little bit like passive smoking. So whether or not you're a porn user or not, it is affecting you and your interactions with other people. If you look at something like Pornhub, who has more daily visits than Amazon, right? So we've got a website selling human flesh getting more daily visits than the world's biggest selling website of every other item. That changes people. It tears at the fabric of what it means to be human and your perceptions of self and others. And so from society-wide point of view, we've got young people going around thinking, I've got to look a certain way, I've got to act a certain way. And most of all, growing up with a mindset of objectification and sexualization, seeing themselves as someone that has only value when they look a certain way or act a certain way. So we see it in young kids, in students, in schools, and how they interact with each other, their expectations going into relationships. And then we see it in how particularly men are relating to women and how marriages are impacted. So the stats and the research on things like violence against women is off the charts. There's a real consensus that porn is linked to violence against women. And I think everyone recognises that, one, we should protect children. Yep. Two, any sort of violence against another person is just not okay. And porn is a big play in hurting children, in essentially abusing them, and in relationships, in perpetuating the mindsets behind violence against women.
I know some of the counter arguments in this space are saying, oh yeah, well, there's the really awful stuff. And look, I'm not going to describe it on the radio, but there's the really, really bad, awful stuff. There's the stuff which involves violence and exploitation. That's absolutely terrible. But I'm at the shallower end of this. It's not doing any harm. What would you say to that?
I would say people are created to be loved and not used. And pornography basically, and anything like, say, sending nudes, sexting, it perpetuates this idea that a person is there to be used. The opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is to use someone. And so when we train ourselves to treat others like a commodity, like an item of use, it essentially tears at that fabric of how we're created to be as people and how we're meant to love people and see them with dignity. So they're the basic problems with this, is it can really affect our mindset. And we think of young people being at a place where their brains are very influenced and plastic, what they call neuroplasticity.
Yep.
Porn use and sexual stimuli puts the brain in a place where it is at its premium for learning. So we're learning these things that are essentially toxic, that are corrosive curriculum for a young person in how to love well and how to be happy in relationships as well.
Somebody's poisoned the water trough. Somebody's poisoned the water hole, actually, for the whole community. And this is impacting the way in which we relate. Looking at some solutions on this one, I know in some parts of the world they've tried different things. Hey, let's take the phones off our kids. Let's ban them from social media. Let's have different types of filters and technology. Is this part of the answer on this one? Paul, is this part of the strategy on pushing back?
Yeah, I think we need a multi-layer approach. I've got a little YouTube clip which talks about the e-safety onion, how we can protect our young kids and our family. And it starts with the internal filter. The only filter they can take with them anywhere is their own filter inside. So that's healthy education, healthy conversations. But there are many practical things we can do on a society level, and certainly I'm all for having safeguards.
Yep.
You know, in the old days of porn being on the bookshelves or porn being on the DVD shelf, you wouldn't have a family home with, say, Christian parents or parents who care about their kids with just this X-rated material available. So I think it's totally fine for parents and governments to try to implement some safeguards so that we essentially take this X-rated adult content off the bookshelf for young people.
I like the analogy with smoking, actually, because you can say, oh well, these cigarettes, we're not going to sell them to young people, are they? But what we've learned is this is toxic regardless of what age you are. Certainly don't give them to children, but this is poisoning the water hole for our entire society. Let's protect the kids, but let's put some safeguards for the grown-ups as well, right?
Yeah, totally. Look, I have safeguards on my own Wi-Fi. I have safeguards on my device because I just don't want to stumble across that stuff. As a man, I don't need the temptation. And any person that thinks that this is just a problem for someone who's enslaved, who's not a Christian, who's not committed to being a good person is wrong. The stats on Christian men is that their porn use is almost identical to those who don't believe in Jesus. The recent research out of the US from the Barna Institute basically found for the first time in human history, the majority of adult Christians report porn consumption. Yep. And so that's as high as 75% for Christian men, which is off the charts kind of numbers.
And I suppose in addition to that, and hey, maybe this is a good thing, there's different views on this, but for Christian men who are involved in this, who have an addiction in this area, as well as the damage that it's doing to their relationship, there are layers of guilt and shame and secrecy that goes over that. If people knew what I did in my spare time on my phone or whatever, then that in itself is part of the problem, the impact it's having on mental health.
Yeah, totally. It's a double-edged sword, right? It's like you get taken out with the sin or the stuff up or the challenge, and then the mental repercussions of shame and feeling inadequate, you get taken out again. And so, on a personal level, I just want to say to anyone listening that you are bigger and greater than your shame, and you are not alone in this struggle, right? And that's one of the biggest things is, unfortunately, a lot of churches are not talking about this. Yeah. Obviously, the strategies are not working when we have so many Christians committed to living a life where they see lust as something that's not okay, but so many of them are stuck impacted by their digital devices and pornography. So I just want to encourage all leaders, all churches, all people out there. We need to start the conversation to lower the shame. When you keep things in the dark, they grow, right? When you keep them in the dark, they just create a heaviness in our lives. We need to have these conversations. And when men get together and talk about this, it's actually a joyous thing. There's a real relief. There is a real lightness. And it's not just men, but the program I've developed is specifically for men.
I just wanted to touch on that, actually, because it seems to be, and certainly the generalization is this is a guy's problem, and that whilst that is true, it's not restricted to guys. The program that you've developed, those stout-hearted men's programs specifically targeted at men, why that choice, Paul?
Look, in some ways it wasn't a choice. I'm a man myself, and I very much lean into my own journey, my own story, and my own lack of, I suppose, fathering or discipleship that I received when I needed it. So that sort of gave me the impetus to get involved in speaking to young people and now also speaking to men. I believe that we need programs for women as well, and I hope to be involved in producing one following the rollout of Stout Hearted. But men are very much at the epicenter of this struggle. Women are also sucked into it. Roughly speaking, about twice as many men use porn, but the numbers for women, again, the Barna report found 40% of Christian adult women and generally porn use, about 1 in every 3 users is a porn user. So women, 1 in every 3 porn users is a woman. So look, I chose men because I think it's the epicenter of the struggle. And if we strengthen and empower men in this area, then that can have a flow-on effect to families, to children, to wives. And it's also where often the biggest struggle and the most problematic behaviour exists.
What's at the heart of this Stout-Hearted program? What in essence does the program do, Paul?
Look, the program is trying to start a conversation and also disciple the men that do the program. So it looks at the key areas of the eyes, the heart, and the mind, and speaks into that using biblical study, speaks into that using neuroscience, speaks into that using habit training, and just community brings men together to actually have a conversation and go on a journey. I think the biggest issue is most men just haven't received any discipleship. Yep. Like some men have never heard this spoken about once from a message, a pastor or a priest. Sometimes men have never bought a book or done a product, but they've had a struggle their whole life. And I say, we just got to step into this space. Let's spend more time working on this than we work on our studies or on doing our tax return at the end of the year. We need to dig into this as a primary area of challenge in modern society that is not being met by the support, the training, the discipleship that our men are receiving.
And honestly, this is something which the church should be better at. The disturbing statistics all round, but perhaps for a lot of people, the shock of saying the statistics aren't really different between the church and the world on this one. You would hope and pray that being a follower of Jesus increases your sexual integrity. This is something that we've obviously got wrong, but we can do better in this space.
Yeah, I believe so. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind, right? We need all to be transformed. It is a process. A lot of people, care more about evangelization statistics rather than the holiness and the discipleship of our congregations. And I just really want to encourage people that I know it's hard. I know it's scary. I know that it's easy to talk about safe topics, but we need to have this conversation because it is taking out men and it is taking out whole communities and it's rendering us unable to be what God has called us to be here on earth. And so I just want to encourage everyone, whether it be Stout Hearted or another program, I think this needs to be rolled out in every community. I think other than evangelization and onboarding a Christian, like an Alpha program, I think this type of discipleship is a requirement in the modern hypersexual world we live in. We need to equip people. We need to do better than just knowing it's a problem.
And hey, actual holiness is so much better than self-righteousness in this particular way, and being able to demonstrate that there is freedom, there is a way forward here. This, again, is part of the difficulty. Some guys have just perhaps come to the conclusion, this will always be my struggle. This is an addiction. I've tried to walk away from this beforehand, and I find myself coming back to the same bad habits. This is part of the nature of addiction, and because of the shame associated with it, this is perhaps an addiction that they feel they can never have a conversation with. What are some of the keys here for setting guys free and for achieving success in this area, Paul?
Yeah, look, I think the first step, and this is for anyone with any struggle, but particularly this struggle, is to bring it out in the light, right? You've got to find a safe place to confess this and speak about it. And generally what happens, like all these shame-ridden areas of our lives, is you find out you're not alone, right? If you're going to bring this up in a men's group, as I said, most men in the area will either be currently struggling or identify with it. And if there's someone who hasn't or doesn't, I'll tell you what, there's people in their circle of influence who need their help. And so they should put their hand up as well. And so that's the first and foremost thing is actually bring it into the light. And then I would say come into some discipleship or some deeper understanding on this topic. And most adults have good formation, but they need to then put that into practice, right? So part of the reason why we do it as a program is it's not a talk, it's not an event, right? It actually needs a journey, right? Be transformed by the renewing of your mind, right? That points towards neuroplasticity. That points towards growing in virtue, growing in character through repetition of habit. And so I'd say we've just got to start the conversation and then get connected, because community is what pulls us out of our addictions and our habits and our struggles.
And so
isolation is what drives them.
So not the sort of thing you go, hey, here's a room full of 150 guys, let's all work this out together. This is actually in closer community, in relationship with a number of accountability partners. What does it look like practically, Paul?
Yeah, practically, Stouthearted is set up so that it can be run. Ideally, probably the way I'd suggest it's run is across 8 weeks. You meet for 8 weeks for one session for a couple of hours. It's video led, so anyone can run it. You don't need to be an expert. And then there is a daily devotional or discipleship that you can do during the week to process and to put some activation activities in your life. It can also be run as a weekend. So we've released it as a weekend format as well, where men gather for 2 or 3 days and then they go through the activities in the weeks that follow. And we're also about to release it as an individual program where people can actually do it at home. But as I said, isolation is one of the big problems here. Being stuck on your device is one of the big problems. So we try to get people out of that into communities.
And into accountability as well, so that there is somebody who knows your secret, that in some ways takes the power away from it, able to take steps for freedom and hold each other account in that space.
Totally. That's a big part of the program is firstly leaning into the brotherhood there. So if a church group was to do it and they got 40 men rocking up, you'd break into smaller groups and you would journey with those men. It's such an important part. But what I would say, and this is often what scares me, and they're like, oh, do I have to actually share, is the program is set up in a beautiful, gentle way so that it naturally unfolds. It's not about just coming in and fessing up your deepest struggles, right? And so what I would say is it's for every man. Like literally, I hope no man is listening to this thinking this is not for me, because even men that don't struggle, say, with pornography, do the program and come out just loving it. One guy's about to do it for a 3rd time and he has never struggled, but his marriage is better and he's a person of greater integrity and closer to Christ as a result of doing the program. And so he wants to keep doing it.
That's a good contrast to have there. This isn't just for addicts. It's about, I suppose, putting some strength and resilience, some integrity into the relationship that men have so that they never will be addicts. They won't be tempted to fall in this way.
Totally. It's equipping us for the fight, because if you think historically, there's never been a struggle like this before. Like this is new and this is larger. This is the Goliath in men's lives, right? If we're being real about it. And so every man needs to be equipped. Every man needs to be constantly revising these basic biblical principles, these basic principles of healthy living, and also to be kept accountable. I don't care how good you are. Everyone needs to be kept accountable. If I don't have an exam date, I am not studying, right? So we all need it.
Yeah, exactly. So for people that are listening to this at the moment, what are the next steps? How do people engage with the material? If somebody's perhaps thinking this is something that our church men's group would be interested in doing, how do they connect? How do they become a part of this, Paul?
Yeah, totally. Just jump online and check out stouthearted.com. So STOUT stouthearted.com. And you can find everything you need there. You can actually sign up for free and see the first week for free and access the platform and access the video materials. And as I said, shortly there'll be an individual version of the program coming out. But we got all the support materials for anyone that wants to run this. We've got flyers they can hand out. We've got promotional videos. It really is completely laid out so that anyone can lead a group. It could be 2 or 3 guys in the shed, or it could be 100 men in a cafe or in a church or a hall.
You talked about this being the Goliath of our generation. I mean, it's a great metaphor, because this is a huge issue for our society. Is it a battle that we can win?
Totally.
Difficult to get the genie back in the bottle on this one.
Yes. Look, it is difficult, but we've got to get into the battle, and it is. Like, I've got my story is that I can share my story, the guys that I've seen come through the program, and if you check out Stout-Hearted, we lean into the I suppose the analogy of David and Goliath as the central image. And one of the mistakes men make, or anyone makes, and unfortunately I think a lot of Christians, I read the kids' David and Goliath story to my son and he loves it.
Yeah.
But a lot of Christians think this is just a story of faith and God's miracle. And it is a story of faith. But David had been using his sling for decades in the field. It says in Scripture he had been taking down bears and lions. He was practiced, he was equipped, he had faith in God and God had faith in him, but he'd also trained himself for the battle. So that's the issue. How are we going to equip our next generation or equip ourselves for the future or our current struggle if we're not willing to do the training, the repetition of just digging in to God's word, digging into fellowship, and digging into some practical techniques for our lives?
Paul, thank you so much for the work that you're doing in this very important space. One more time for the web address if people wanted to find out more.
Yeah, it's stouthearted.com, and you can find our schools work, our schools ministry at realtalkaustralia.com as well.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.